The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all.
The life of comic fandom can be lonely, but just around the corner can be found. A place that lets you know you're not the only nerdy true believer who's around. The comic book store, 'cause that's where the books live, but it's also much more. It's the heart of the art form that we all adore. Your friendly neighborhood comic book store. Out among the stacks of new releases, browsing with your future new best friends, you're gonna find a book you'll love to pieces. The girl behind the counter recommends dollar books and shelves of graphic novels. Titles old and new, you'll find them all, with action figures, board games, toys, and models to add to your new Comic Wednesday haul. The comic book store, 'cause that's where the books live, but it's also much more. It's the heart of the art form that we all adore. Your friendly neighborhood comic book store.
Ah, yes, now we're back in the comic book store with the apple I adore, Evan Bevins.
Here.
How do you do, sir?
I was responding to attendance, I'm doing good. Not very funny today, apparently, but, doing good.
You are, in fact, here.
Ah.
Yeah.
High five?
No, wait. Here we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That was great.
I am your awkward mandated reporter, Mr. Mark Radulich, and frankly, I'm mortified. And yes, tonight on Comic Strip, we are, in fact, talking here. I came upon this, it was released late last year, somewhere in the fall, I guess somewhere between October and November. And I know that because because this was like a first date movie. And I know when that took place for me. So it was one of those things where I was on a date and we wanted to go to the movies, and I just kind of picked whatever was here, and was going to start at the time that we were near the theater. I didn't know anything about it. I had no idea what this was. I remember when I pitched it to the girl, she's like, "Well, what is this?" And I'm like, "I have no freaking clue. It's close and it's and it's convenient. That's what it is."
Forrest Gump too.
Yeah, clearly. I had no idea this reunited Robert Zemeckis, Tom Hanks, and Robin Wright together.
And Alan Silvestri. Let's please not forget Alan Silvestri.
And Alan Silvestri. Yeah. So I watched it then, half paid attention to it, and thought, well, this is interesting. And then when we were coming up with a list of things to do, I realized that the movie was based on this book. And I was like, well, Evan, now we have to talk about it because it's right in our wheelhouse. So what about you?
Right here for us.
How did you get here?
Well, I did not know it was based on a comic, or this is one of the few times that I've been intentionally saying graphic novel, because I could not imagine this as a standard comic book.
Right.
But I mean, it absolutely uses the art form. But no, I didn't know about it until you told me. But I had seen the previews. I mean, reuniting the Forrest Gump dream team. And I thought it looked kind of interesting. And I'm like, but can they do more with it other than the gimmick? And so I had some preconceptions going into both. And we'll talk about whether those were met or upended or what.
Yeah, I don't know why you would want to adapt this book into a movie, except that you're testing technology and you have, and we'll get into this as we go through the podcast, but I have a sneaking suspicion that Robert Zemeckis was wrestling with an idea, wrestling with a feeling, and either he came upon it naturally or someone pitched him this book and he said, I know that's not what this book is about, but I'm going to make this book about my idea. And we got this movie.
I could see that. I mean, do you want me to tell you my preconceptions or now,
Yes.
or should we?
Yeah. Please tell me please don't do your craft review. Please stick to the agreed upon format.
Okay.
Is the theme of this last month's worth of podcast with me and
okay.
all of you people.
No, yeah, I was just, what I thought going in was like, okay, this is a gimmick, but before I knew it was a comic, and then as I'm reading the graphic novel or comic or whatever you want to call it, I'm like, okay, I see what they're doing with this. I think we're going to get the same basic concept, one point in time, one fixed point across a whole lot of time. But the movie will go into more character stuff and be its own thing, and the graphic novel will be its own thing, and only the basic concept is where they will intersect.
Right. It's funny. It actually, I incidentally end up doing a lot of podcasts like circling a particular theme. Mac and I talked about this on Thursday with Cloud Atlas, about a longitudinal story told over different points in time.
I was thinking about Cloud Atlas as I was watching it.
Were you really?
Yeah, no, I really was.
Okay, it sounded to me like you were pulling my leg because it was waiting for me to laugh. So
I really was. I was like,
if you're going to make a bold statement of I was thinking about Cloud Atlas, I need more.
Yeah, no, I just, it did make me think, because, well, Tom Hanks was in Cloud Atlas as well, right?
He certainly was, Ollie.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so I was thinking about that. And then, like these stories that are set over time and repeating themes, or what was it? I think, rhyming events.
Right.
When Franklin put it.
Yes.
So yeah, no, I really was. That was not sarcasm at all.
Okay. So let's get into what the book is. Here started its life as a 6-page comic story by Richard McGuire, published in 1989 and expanded into a 304-page graphic novel in 2014. The concept of here in both versions is to show the same location in space at different points in time, ranging from the primordial past to thousands of years in the future. Here has been recognized as a groundbreaking experiment with the formal properties of comics. This graphic novel was adapted. Okay, we already know it was adapted into the thing. The 1989 original story has been recognized as groundbreaking. Douglas Wolk wrote that its influence has echoed through art comics for decades. Its influence is particularly notable in the works of Chris Ware, who wrote a lengthy essay on it in the magazine Comic Art. The original story was reprinted for the first time in that issue. It has been frequently anthologized since its original publication. Writer Lee Constantine's analysis of the 2014 version of the story came to the conclusion, more so than the original raw 6-pager, the book version of Here dwells on the radical, because intrinsic, destructibility of life. Though we get a glimpse of what might be some sort of utopian future, Here's human story ultimately stands against a stark background, largely devoid of human presence. That is a yawning cosmic indifference bookends the life of McGuire's little house. And this goes on and on. The French edition of the graphic novel, titled Ishi and published by Editions Gallimard, was given the, I can't even begin to pronounce that, Angoulême International Comics Festival Prize. If you say it fast, it sounds like you're saying it right.
Exactly, yeah.
Festival Prize for Best Album in 2016. Here was given the second place award at the 2017 Game Awards. The Portuguese language edition, titled Aqui and published by Cha das Letras, was given the. I'm glad Robert's not here to correct correct my mispronunciations. Was given the Silver Premio Grampo in Brazil in 2018. And this goes on and on. So, what are we talking about here?
I can tell you that EC is French for here.
Perfect. Okay.
Value added.
So, the concept is deceptively simple. but thematically deep. Every panel takes place in the exact same physical location, a corner of a living room, but jumps around in time from prehistoric past to the distant future. Through a layering of windows into various time periods, McGuire explores themes of memory, transience, change, and permanence. The comic plays with temporality, layout, and meaning, showing unrelated events happening in the same spot across centuries, with some panels even layering multiple years simultaneously. What did you think of this book, Evan?
I thought it was pretty interesting. I you know the it definitely uses the comic format in a way that you don't always see. I mean, it's not like I've never seen a comic with pages where panels take place in different times or reflect what's going on. But this, with it all being in that same spot, I mean, one of the first times they do it is when the woman says, now why did I come in here again? And then you see a cat 42 years later walking through there. In the next page, you see the woman in 1957, the cat in 1999, and the undeveloped land in 1623. So it uses familiar comic format like the different panels, but uses them in kind of a different way. So yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting. Some of it I found a little bit hard to follow. Like I don't. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe any of the characters are really named. Although for the most part, you don't. I mean, you get the broad ideas. It's not like I'm like, I don't understand. Why are these people taking pictures of each? It's most of it's very relatable things that they're doing.
Yeah.
And then obviously you have the different events reflected. Like there's one where people are playing Twister 30 some years apart, but in the same place, or one where the guy's talking about the symbiotic relationship that the dog has with the mailman barking at him every day. And that's in 1954. And meanwhile, somebody rings the doorbell for what turns out to be a significant visit. Well, as significant as any event can be in here in 1986. So, I mean, I don't know that I would have described it as deeply and philosophically as some of what you wrote, but I mean, yeah, even I could catch on to the theme, which is like across time and culture and everything. A lot of us have more in common than we realize.
I don't know without checking ChatGPT or talking to the author. God, talk to people. If the author's intention was to challenge the anxious notion that you matter so much people are paying attention to you. I was thinking about this book, and I feel like what the author was trying to get at through the use of these pictures was how little we matter. Like that's a notion challenged by traditional Western religions. Of course we matter. We're God's children. We're all blessed snowflakes. Okay, what if you took the opposite approach? Again, not a novel idea. This is, I think, elements of nihilism in here. None of us matter. In the great cosmic expanse of things, we are so bloody insignificant that none of this really matters. If none of it matters, then what are you supposed to do with your life? And here's the thing. If that's what he was going for, he never gets to the other end of the equation. That is an incomplete sentence. And I struggled with this book in that I don't know if I'm projecting meaning onto it or that's really what he was going at. But either way, this feels like an unfinished meal.
Well, you presented those two kind of contrasting ideas. I kind of said when I was summing it up in my notes that I kind of felt both of those were in there. Okay. I feel like it's a commentary or contrast on the fleeting nature of humanity against the massive timescale of the earth, but acknowledging the importance of those fleeting moments. And then I added, or something. So I got a little bit of both because it was like, yeah, it's, here's all this stuff that matters in these people's lives. And, from dust we came, to dust we shall return. But I mean, like and even more so in the movie, there's genuine emotion and resonance in there, even while it point you to the fact that this is just a blip on the cosmic scale.
Yeah, let's put it this way. I'm not coming down hard either way. I'm just sort of sharing an idea with a friend. We're just casually talking about a book with an audience here. Um, and I was thinking a lot about the book as I flipped through it. I think saying that I read it would be a gross overstatement. But I definitely turned pages in what is physically defined as a book, and I think this is a very Eastern philosophical idea of of opposite things existing at the same time and being okay with that. As you just said, I'm kind of taking what you said and throwing other fancy words in there. But I think we tend to, because we're Westerners, we grew up in a Western way, we tend to look at things linearly and like binarily. It's either this or that. The cat is either the cat is like the cat in the box is either dead or it's not. Um, but just because that's how we approach the world, and it's underscored, I think, by technology. Computers operate the same way. Things
Mhm.
are either zeros or ones when you get down to it. But there's a kind of an Eastern philosophical view of why can't all things exist at once? Why can't we have countervailing ways of being existing in the same space? And so if that's what he's going for, it's fascinating. I think if you're like, okay, so kind of draw out what you mean by all of that. I think Richard McGuire might have been saying with this book, yes, just because ultimately we don't matter in the grand scheme of things, you are a sentient being with thoughts, feelings, needs, wants, and boundaries, and you matter.
Yeah.
And the lives you touch matter. The lives you touch you matter. Don't go through life getting caught up in the cosmic equation of things. All things matter.
And you talked about the Eastern philosophy, but I think it's present in a lot of things. As we were talking, I was reminded of something, and I pulled it up. But I mean that is addressed in the Bible. It was nagging at me. It sounded familiar, but it's Psalm 8, verses 3 and 4. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is mankind that you are mindful of them? Human beings that you care for them. So it even it's not necessarily at odds with Christianity or a more Western view, I guess, because it's the idea that God created all this stuff and yet desires a personal relationship with us, knows us, even though we are small dots in the grand scheme.
Yeah, I do think that there is sort of, if you're like, what, sell me on this book, what's the undercurrent? I think playing with the contradictions of time and space, which I think might be another way of trying to frame what this book is about.
You describe it that way to Jesse Starcher, and he'll pick it right up.
Leave my friend alone. Don't bully him.
Why?
But
Why?
oh, you're making a time travel.
Time travel.
You're
That's
making a
all I'm
time
saying.
travel joke. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the movie was directed by Robert Zemeckis of
There
Back
you
to the
go.
Future fame. So there you go. It all comes.
Yeah.
It all adds up. As
Maybe you were having trouble with it because you weren't thinking fourth dimensionally.
that's often what I get accused of. So what's good about the book? I think because like we've been at this for almost 20 minutes and almost entirely about this. We didn't go into a tangent about Secret Wars. And I think if it provokes a conversation about metaphysics and religion, and the ethereal nature of existence, that's good for something. I can't really discount it for that. I think art should make you think and reflect. On the other hand, I want to get your opinion on this. This has only got 2 or 3 different colors going on. It's a very bland kind of beige, piss yellow color scheme. And the art is sketchbook at best. And that's obviously purposeful. I don't think it was like, well, I can't draw anything but stick figures, so this is what you get. But I think if you're not necessarily married to traditional photorealistic art, simple art can leave the reader more focused on some of the other elements of the book. On the other hand, this was not that interesting to look at.
Yeah, I think part of that, the impression I got was that some of the more simple renderings kind of allowed you to personalize it a little more.
Mm-hmm.
Like I read, the reason that Master Chief is one of the great video game characters is because you can't see his face, so you can imagine yourself under that armor or whatever. So it's almost like they're not. I mean, you can tell generally everything that's going on, but they're not so distinctive that they take on a life of their own, which in some ways made it a little harder to relate to some of it. Like I feel like most of this book is the concept.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't want to say there's no memorable lines, because there were some lines. Of course, I read it. I watched the movie a couple days after I read it that I instantly remembered when they showed up in the movie. But like, there's not a lot that's super dramatic, which reflects the idea of this is a reflection of mundane life or whatever, and let you personalize it more. But it also, other than the concept, doesn't make a lot of impression on me.
The last thing I want to bring up, because I don't want to extend this conversation past the point where it becomes like, why are we still talking about this? I was saying to somebody, I think I was talking about this with Robert. Not everything needs to be a movie. Not everything needs to be a book. Not everything needs to be a television show. And I think sometimes we conceptualize things in one format and it ends up being produced in another. And maybe the chosen format for final distribution wasn't really the right fit at all. This feels like an art gallery presentation, like someone's kind of art show piece.
Mm-hmm.
That someone else was like, you're not going to get these. Like McGuire has a series of paintings in his home that say this is here. This is my conception is here. This is me playing with time and space, and these are like 6 paintings that I've done, and I will bring them to an art gallery, and people will love me. And someone looked at this and said, "Nope, you've done everything in piss yellow. No one gets what this is. Go away." And he was like, "All right, this was a failure. I will reconceptualize this as a comic book because that's cheaper and I can actually get that made." And then someone took the comic book and it was like, "This is fantastic. Do more of this." And he makes a book out of it. And I'm thinking, and I'm watching this like, why does the book begin here and end here? Like, the movie doesn't. I don't have a problem with this, because if you follow, this is really about this one family and everything else is sort of window dressing. That's fine. We'll talk about that momentarily. But because the book has no narrative structure as such, it's just sort of, it begins because the Earth kind of has a beginning to it. Kind of. And it ends because we ran out of pages. Why did we shoot this house 1,000 times? Because we ran out of bullets, that's why. As St. Grady Judd tells us. And so I struggle sort of wrapping my head conceptually around this as, why did this need to be a book? This seems weird to be a book. Why isn't this more of an art gallery piece? Your thoughts?
Well, I get what you're saying. I think, I said initially that when I've talked about this, I've been careful to say graphic novel, even though usually I use comic, graphic novel, trade paperback, interchangeably, and half the time I think people only say graphic novel so that they can show you that they're more important than a comic book.
Okay, but because graphic novel has an adult connotation to it, yes, as a serious artist and a serious writer, and comic book sounds like something you give to a child.
But this, like what I said, I couldn't imagine it as a comic book, because I'm curious to see what the original 6 pages were, because I think I would look at that and go, oh, and that's it. I think putting it in a book format rather than 6 pages or 6 paintings gives it more of the scale that he's going for. I mean, sure, you can have, here's, pre-colonial times, here's Benjamin Franklin, here's those people in the 50s, here's somebody in the 90s, here's the far future after the earth is flooded or whatever. and you give the same message, but even the book, without delving too much into the characters, gives you this life and the sense that even these small fleeting periods were lengthy and mattered to people.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, like, I'm not sure that you get out of it what you would get from a 300 and some page prose book, but
Right.
I think when the sample size is that much bigger, you get more than you would have gotten out of the gallery show or the smaller comic that just presents the concept. I think it adds a dimension to it. Now, whether that makes it more interesting, more relevant, I guess that's in the eye of the beholder. But I think making it longer gives it more depth or weight to it that you couldn't do, even though you're sort of conveying the same message in a more succinct format.
Interestingly enough, there's a section of the Wikipedia page called Museum Exhibition. In 2014, in commemoration of the publication of the graphic novel, the Morgan Library and Museum, collaborating with the New York Public Library, launched the exhibition From Here to Here. Richard McGuire Makes a Book. All right, which tracked the process behind McGuire's story and expansion of the story to a full-length work.
No, I didn't see that coming.
McGuire relished the synchronicity of having the exhibition in a one-room gallery that is about a book that takes place in one room. Anything else about this book? I'm not unhappy that we did this. It's a little out of the wheelhouse here, but I think I've told you and Jesse anytime we've just been discussing podcast topics, I'm so utterly bored by traditional superhero stuff that, like, I gotta find other things to do, or I'm not gonna do this anymore. And this, at the very least, stretched me as a reviewer of comic books. So I'm not unhappy we did this.
Yeah, I thought it was definitely interesting and different. You probably don't want me to bring up that the page that takes place in 1 million BC is a perfect opportunity to cross over with Jason Aaron's Prehistoric Avengers.
I mean, you can if you want to, if that makes you happy.
I probably shouldn't do that, or reference the fact that in Age of Ultron, Paul Bettany as the Vision says, "But a thing isn't beautiful because it lasts," which I think resonates with this.
I do. I think it absolutely not only resonates, it correlates with this book rather well. Evan Bevins of the Screaming Boy podcast. All right.
Ronnie's going to sue me one of these days. It's going to be your fault.
I think I said, like, of the Screaming Boy podcast about the Wachowskis the other night. And I was like, Atlanta Wachowski of the Screaming Boy podcast. Like, what the fuck is he? Is he having a stroke? Maybe. All right. So that's the book. Let's get into the film here. Here is a 2024 American drama film produced and directed by Robert Zemeckis, who co-wrote the screenplay with Eric Roth based on the aforementioned book we've been talking about for the past half hour. Echoing the source material, the film is told in a
not Eli Roth, right?
No. In a non-linear fashion, using a lockdown or static shot technique. The story covers a single plot of land and its inhabitants from the distant past of the 21st century to the 21st century. During the film, the screen is often subdivided into panes, presenting events from different times simultaneously. The film stars Tom Hanks, Robin Wright, Paul Bettany, and Kelly Riley, with digital de-aging via generative artificial intelligence being used on much of the cast to have them portray their characters over time. Here premiered at the AFI Fest on October 25th, 2024, before being theatrically released in the U.S. by TriStar Pictures through Sony Pictures on November 1st, 2024. This film
TriStar was still a thing.
Yes, sir. The film received generally negative reviews from critics and grossed $15.8 million off a $50 million budget. Yeah, this thing bombed hard.
So we're not going to get the sequel there.
No, sir.
Or here to there.
Yes. Robert Zemeckis was honored at the Chicago International Film Festival in 2024 in the category of Founder's Legacy, and then it won the Emerging Technology Award at the Visual Effects Society Awards. So some critical responses before we get into this. Yeah, this got a 37 on Rotten Tomatoes. Peter Straczynski of RogerEbert.com gave the film 1 out of 4 stars, which I think is a bit harsh, and wrote, "Here is a work so cloying and ham-fisted in its attempt to move you that there is a point when you find yourself thinking that the only thing that Zemeckis hasn't thrown into the mix is a needle drop of Our House," and then he proceeds to do just that. Before we get into this, I watched this last night with a good friend of mine, and I was very keyed into this movie in a way that I haven't been keyed into a movie for a while. No, not when I watched at home, I should say. So like kind of on the edge of my seat, and more because I was like, I'm wondering how many of like the boomer great directors, Zemeckis, Spielberg, Lucas, Scorsese, these guys that that came out of like the golden age of filmmaking right before Star Wars murdered the industry and everything in its path. There was this, period of filmmaking where these were like the rebel filmmakers, and these were all boomers, right? And the boomers were kind of sold on this idea of the American dream. The American dream is, owning a home. And where 75 years later, and I think a lot of these boomers are kind of looking back going, I feel like we were lied to. I don't feel like the American dream as it was sold to us as, personal property, land, a house, very much this particular structure feels more like a gilded cage than it does a icon of freedom, agency, and success. And that like Zemeckis is kind of not throwing a tantrum. This isn't like wildly emotional in that sense. But I do feel like, and we'll talk about what this is in a minute, but I kind of wanted to just get your take on where Zemeckis may have been coming from with this, where like he really had kind of like this depressive bee in his bonnet, it feels like, and made this movie lamenting the false promise snake oil sale of the home. And then the critics turned around and backlashed against that idea. Like, don't you tell me the American dream is bad. Don't you tell me owning a home is bad. I've worked my whole fucking life for this, you motherfucker. And that's why this is getting bad reviews. That's my kind of stream of consciousness babbly opening to reviewing this movie.
My one of my opening notes was, did Tom Hanks do motion capture for the animals? So
we are not the same.
Yeah, I know. We're not. No, I can see some of that. The other movie, I told you, and you thought I was lying, that this reminded me of Cloud Atlas a little bit because of the the echoing nature. It did not just because of the cast make me think of Forrest Gump. Another one that it reminded me of, and I can't remember how it was critically received, but I can imagine people not liking it either, was Mr. Holland's Opus.
I have actually not seen Mr. Holland's Opus, so in 50 words or less, draw the parallel from here to Mr. Holland's Opus.
Okay, well, Richard Dreyfuss is a composer who dreams of, being a legendary composer and takes a job to make ends meet as a high school band director.
Right. And
it's goes through decades of this and him never quite getting to live out his dream. But the idea is, and there's actually a song in it, I think it's a John Lennon song, but that kind of sums up, one of the lyrics kind of sums up the movie. Life is what's happening. Life is what happens while you're busy making other plans.
Makes sense. Also,
and so that's what, I mean, that's kind of the arc, similar to the arc that Tom Hanks has in this movie, is he's making all these plans and striving to do this stuff, and it doesn't quite pan out. And before you know it, he and his wife are regretting the missed opportunities and things like that. But they've built this whole life on the same plot of land where, Native Americans experienced their lives and deaths, and their parents, or Richard's parents, the guy that invented the Lazy Boy, all these folks, went through their ups and downs similarly. So if I had to guess why got sort of a bad review, bad reviews. I think what didn't the word cloying pop up in yours? I guess some of it was a little too sentimental. Although I'm kind of a sucker for that. I don't dislike things that challenge me, but
But that's if Forrest Gump was Zemeckis being hopeful, here feels like Zemeckis being regretful. Like this
I see
isn't the
that.
same tone.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. One of my biggest review beefs. I mean, well, I guess it has to be a beef if the other person knows you exist. But I remember somebody, and I'm not going to run their name through the ground or anything, just because we have different opinions. That doesn't make them bad. But I remember a reviewer describing Patch Adams, which was a movie I enjoyed, as toxic and offensive.
That's a very modern view of Patch Adams. When was this?
What's that?
When was this?
It was right after it came out.
It's good to know nothing changes. Nothing.
Yeah, and this person also sung the praises of Kill Bill.
Of course they did.
But,
Okay.
But Patch Adams was toxic and offensive. Now, was Patch Adams a little cliche and, sugary sweet? Okay, I can see that. And yes, I mean, I don't know that I found this one totally regretful. I get where you're coming from with that, but part of it was the fact that there were regrets, there was sadness, and yet they found meaning, even though life didn't work out the way that they wanted. There were disappointments, legitimate, disappointments, but and I know it was in the preview, and even though I liked it, it was just maybe a little too sweet. But toward the end, when he brings her back into the house and he says, well, yes, we lived here, which is at once a very simple statement and, kind of a, hey, just in case you're not sure, this is what the movie's about. We're going to, I get that. But, there was the moment where, she's got dementia, she's forgetting things, and she remembers that one little moment where their daughter lost her award and got super upset and then found it, and they were so excited. And it's like, I mean, does that matter against the backdrop of, the earth and hundreds of years and all these regrets and things that have fallen short? And it's like, yeah, a nice moment of joy with your family, that does matter.
I definitely agree with that statement. It was funny, in the first act of this, I turned to my friend, I'm like, you ever notice how Spielberg, Lucas, and Zemeckis and all these guys that lived through it really fetishize the post-war period? And then as the movie ended, I was like, oh no, they're looking back and now see and now see the folly of the life they've lived. Like they kind of hate where they came from. That's the impression I get now when I look at the stories that Spielberg, Lucas, and when they are telling stories, and Zemeckis are telling. It does feel like, it's funny. This doesn't totally track, but stay with me. So my dad was a Republican because if you were successful and white and it was the 80s, it was good to be a Republican. It was good to be in line with what the prevailing wisdom of the decade was. And then life happened, and life has a lot of bitter defeats. And somewhere around the time he starts to retire from his chosen profession because it's not working out for him, he becomes like a hard left liberal. And this is around 2001, and ask me why I know it's around 2001, because he went even further to the left after 9/11. And it's like, whenever I talk to elder people who are like far lefties, I always get the impression that it's out of like anger and disappointment. Like less out of political alignment and philosophical belief, and more out of emotional reaction to a life full of disappointments.
You mean there's reasons people can have opinions other than being absolutely 100% right?
No. Listen, so what is this movie? The film adaptation of Here, directed by the aforementioned Robert Zemeckis, maintains
Bobby Z.
the core concept of the original comic, a single location shown over centuries using innovative visual effects and temporal transitions. Zemeckis reimagines McGuire's static panels into a flowing narrative, bringing life and human stories to the space. Unlike the comic, which is abstract and episodic, the film builds a more linear emotional arc centering around a family that inhabits the space over generations. Wright and Hanks portray various incarnations of the same people or archetypes, grounding the comic sweep in emotional intimacy. The film adds dialogue, character development, and a metaphysical tone, making the viewer feel the weight of time in a more literal and sentimental way. Yeah, I'll stick to the main core of the storyline because everything else is kind of window dressing. Basically, we have a post-World War II Greatest Generation family that buys a colonial house in Pennsylvania. And they have kids. They raise those kids there. One of those kids grows up to be Tom Hanks. And Tom Hanks meets a pretty little girl, and that pretty little girl is Robin Wright. And because all good boys do this to pretty little girls, he gets her pregnant. So they have to now raise this child in the house. It should be noted that Paul Bettany, though he has dreams and ambitions and talents and skills, also has a bit of a temper and a drinking problem, and he goes to work selling vacuums to make money to pay for this house, which is unsatisfying work. And over time, he is scaled down and scaled down and scaled down and made to feel inefficient, unable, unwanted, just less of a man.
So you're saying his job as a vacuum salesman sucks?
I do so adore you. Listen, and then Tom Hanks impregnates his girl, and he's an artist, and he wants to be a graphic designer, but he has to make money, so he goes into insurance sales. This is all very meaningful and very relevant later on in the movie, where Robin Wright's about fucking had it with the life they've created. They've lived in the house with his parents for up teen years, and Robin Wright keeps saying, but we need our own life, and we need this. This is just one compromise after another. And finally...
And much like Scrooge in The Muppet Christmas Carol, the money's just not there yet. He's not ready to pull the trigger.
Right.
Another movie I thought of while watching this.
At one point, she turns to Tom Hanks, and she's like, why did you stop painting? And he says with a deep well of regret, because I had to go make money. And like the whole marriage just blows up right after that. So eventually she ends up leaving him to go live out her dreams, and he's taking care of his dad, and eventually the dad dies, Paul Bettany, and Tom Hanks is alone in the house, but he's painting now, and he's trying to figure out what to do with the rest of his life. They have one daughter. She went on to be everything the mother ever wanted to be but couldn't. In this particular case, it was a lawyer. And the movie ends with the house has been not once but twice sold by this point, because Tom Hanks sold the house. It was sold to a black family, and there's a really kind of tortured extended sequence of the black father explaining to his 16-year-old black son what to do if a cop pulls you over and how to not be shot by said cop. And on the one hand, as my wife and I used to say or my ex-wife and I used to say to each other, heard, acknowledged, Robert Zemeckis. Thanks. On the other hand, come on, man.
Yeah,
Are you the 80-year-old white guy really the right messenger for that? Like, it seemed a bit on the nose, and
it did. I mean, I felt like there was some impact to the scene, but it also felt kind of shoehorned in. It's like, because this really does, much more so than the graphic novel, focus in on the one family. So it's like, okay, I get it. There's different families, different times dealing with different things. It's like, yeah, I didn't have a problem with the scene by itself, but yeah, with everything else, it just kind of was like, oh, hey, don't forget.
Yeah, it seemed.
Or there was the brief COVID interlude, which I was surprised by how much I disliked that.
I didn't realize obviously what it was.
I lived through the thing.
My friend had to tell me, like, oh, she dies of COVID. And I'm like, that's what that was? Because I remember the first time I actually thought it was pot she was smelling.
Oh, yeah. It was weird how small a part of the movie that was, but how uncomfortable that made me, which, I mean, we all lived through it, and it
Sure.
was a lot less miserable for me than a lot of people. But I was just like, I'm not sure I'm ready to see that dramatized yet. Like, I don't, I don't need to think about how I feel about it. I pretty much know.
So, I was about to say, the scene screams virtue signaling to me. Like, I don't know if I want to hear about the plight of the average black person and their relationship, tenuous as it is with the police, from Robert fucking Zemeckis. And I don't want to be the guy to be like, you can't talk about abortion unless you're a woman who's had an abortion. Like, I don't want to be that person. On the other hand, I just like, come on, man. This is right back to my
It
father.
feels tacked on.
Well, you're so angry. What are you so angry about, you successful white person? You. So anyway,
Yeah.
I know someone's gonna yell at me for that. Probably someone I know very.
No,
very well.
you're not saying that it's like a bad topic. You're just saying it wasn't effective the way they presented it, and it just felt kind of shoehorned in.
Yeah, I think sometimes the messenger matters, and again, like the message that as a black kid out in the world driving around, if you encounter the police, you shouldn't act like an asshole, I think is a good one. On the other hand, the messenger telling me that, it's hard.
Well, also, we know very little about that family as
Right,
compared
and it's
to.
the one thing they talked about.
Yeah,
It's,
and I get that the idea is different people, same place, different time. I get that, but it was so weighted toward the one family that it just feels like, hey, we got to touch on this. Also, we got to remind people COVID was a thing.
yeah, it absolutely felt tacked on. So anyway, so the movie ends with he sold the house, the black family bought the house, then the black family moves, and right before the house is sold again, Tom Hanks is allowed by the realtor to bring Robin Wright back, and they sit down and they have that conversation of, hey, we lived here, and then the movie ends. I'm going to continue for a moment because I have thoughts. I like this movie a lot more the second time I watched it than the first time. The first time, I don't think I was prepared for what I was about to see going in. So I was very much caught up with the gimmick. And because I didn't know what this was, I did no research on it. I just went in cold. This movie is too weird in presentation to go in cold. You kind of have to know what this is before so you're prepared for it. Because I'm waiting for the panel thing to stop.
Yeah.
And it never does. It just keeps going and going and going. And kind of like with Cloud Atlas, when you keep or The Witcher or any one of these other movies where they don't bother to stop the film long enough to tell you what's happening, they're just doing it, and it's like, we're here, deal with it. Okay, I'm fucking lost though. Like you do have some, I think, inherent obligation to take the audience with you on the journey we're going on. And some people's, the Wachowskis, approach to filmmaking is fuck you. We're going. Keep up. And if you can't, that's your problem. All right, but I'm taking my wallet with me. As you can see in their box office receipts. In any case, I kind of had that issue the first time I watched here. Because I'm kind of going along with it. But I'm like, what does this have to do with the price of tea in China? What is happening here? Why does the lazy boy guy, the relaxer boy, why is that? How does that connect to Paul Bettany and his family? And then we're just kind of watching. At some point, my brain just crossed out all the other stuff. It crosses out the family dealing with influenza and living, and struggling with should I or should I not take my kid in an airplane. It crosses out the lazy boy stuff. It crosses out the Native Americans, and it crosses out Ben Franklin's brother. And I'm just focused on this family drama. And the family drama is, this house is our safe haven, but it's also our prison cell. And that's when I liked the movie a lot more, when I realized that. Like, the first time I watched it, I didn't catch it because I was distracted and I didn't know what this was. And my brain was just trying to unpack what is it that I'm watching, and I couldn't focus on anything else. The second time, because I know how it goes, I'm able to actually key into what's going on in this movie and its dynamic presentation. And then I could key into what Zemeckis, I think, was trying to get at with the script. And when I realized that the house is a symbol for snake oil, I was like, this is an interesting concept. This is an interesting argument that he's trying to make. And that kind of looking back at the last 75 years of what was supposed to be like, American exceptionalism, and it turns out it feels empty and hollow, and you as a person are dissatisfied, and you're looking for reasons why, and you're trying to blame something because it's not fair. And I'm like, well, this is a much more interesting picture than I thought it was going to be. And I can't wait to talk about it with Evan Bevins. So talk about it, Evan Bevins.
Well, I think one of the things that has most in common, other than the concept with the book, is I think there are some, contrasting ideas in here that don't necessarily cancel each other out. Like, we talked about, was the book saying, these little moments matter, or that in the grand scheme of things, nothing matters. And I think it touches on both. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of regret. There's definitely, the symbol of the house holding them back, or being kind of a prison. But also, I think there's some acknowledgement that there is genuine joy and appreciation in those moments, even if life doesn't go the way you expect. I mean, yeah, there's definitely some, hey, maybe the stuff we're chasing after isn't what really matters, but I don't think it says, so your lives were a waste.
Right.
I think it acknowledges that even in that disappointment and those detours, there can still be joy and meaning when you look at what really matters instead of what you're told matters.
It's that, and I'm not coming after you. Don't take this as like, don't get defensive. This isn't about you. But you use that phrase like, my life is a waste, and then immediately got to think of like, well, that only as defined by what exactly? Like, for it to be a waste, you have to have a solid, like, the purpose of life argument. A solid purpose of life, like, thesis statement. The meaning of life is this. I don't know about you, but other than some sort of vague ideas about, being purpose driven, I don't know if anyone's figured out the meaning of life yet. So how do you know if your life is a waste?
Well, I was saying it in that regard, and no, I don't take offense, but in that regard, as Robin Wright didn't get to be a successful lawyer, Tom Hanks wasn't a famous artist, Paul Bettany didn't, take the world of vacuum sales by storm, and
or
so
be whatever the hell else he wanted to be after the war.
Yeah. So at some point, I think all of them felt like failures, or that they had wasted time. And sure, you can make the argument that they screwed up royally in some things, but like, I thought there's a scene where, we know that Paul Bettany has anger issues. We know that he has a drinking problem. And then there's that one scene where he just goes and starts getting rid of all the alcohol. And there's never a moment that says, well, now I've gone to AA and everything's turned around. I mean, it's still not perfect. He's still, blissfully unaware that him telling Robin Wright that he's giving them the house is not, the answer to all her prayers and doesn't fill her with joy.
Boy, haven't we all been Paul Bettany, though? I'm doing this wonderful thing. And then, and over there is this unappreciative bitch. He's just like, nothing matters. Like, nothing I do. Like, why does everyone hate me?
So, I mean, yeah, what I'm saying is they were defining success or failure in a certain way. And I mean, not for nothing, raising a family and making sure they know they were loved is not an unimportant thing.
Well, it's interesting because as you were talking, and I started to kind of, but I'm like, no, he has a point to make and he'll get there. So shut up and wait for it. But
maybe a 50-50 shot.
You're better than others. Let me tell you. But I'm not waiting an hour for you to get to your point. But I started to think about like, well, maybe Robert Zemeckis is saying happiness isn't in homes and isn't in things. Happiness is in people. But I struggle with that because I'm also the same person telling people in like therapy, don't hitch your happiness to people in the sense of you're happy because of them.
Mm-hmm.
Live parallel to people. Enjoy people's companionship. Enjoy the intimacy being connected to other people brings, but don't make them the battery for your happiness meter, because that's a recipe for depression. That's a recipe for disappointment and frustration. And I'm wondering if Zemeckis was trying to circle that with, like, Tom Hanks and Robin Wright shouldn't have been happy necessarily because of each other, but being with each other is where the happiness lies. And I think that also might be too ethereal for some people to kind of grasp.
Yeah. I mean, you talked about understanding the meaning of life, and if anybody's got, I mean, and I don't claim to, but I mean, me personally,
Mm-hmm.
I find meaning in my faith, and in knowing that I'm.
Hang on, I'm going to let you continue. But when I say no one's figured, there is no unified, agreed upon meaning of life.
Right. Yeah. No, I didn't take offense at any of that you said, but I'm saying that's where I find meaning in trying to discern the will of God, and knowing that I believe that I've got to try my best. I also know from experience that I'm not going to succeed a lot. So trusting that there's a higher purpose, that there's forgiveness, and that, I mean, I think I need to do things to be successful, to provide for my kids, but I also don't think I have to be rich and famous to do that. And so knowing that there's grace, and that I'm not, that I'm not going to succeed at everything, and I'm not going to have all the answers, but trusting that there are answers, that's where I kind of find meaning and comfort. I don't know if I got to a point there, but I mean, that's why I don't know if you can just nail down that Zemeckis is saying happiness is not in things, it's in people, because like you said, people will let you down too. Chasing after things that you might not get, either because of your own efforts, lack thereof, or circumstances beyond your control, isn't going to get it either. But it's some of the little things in there that I think, I don't.
What if it's gratitude for existence?
There you go.
Which I feel like is very Eastern philosophy, but then you're going to pull a Bible thing out at me, and I'm going to, walk off the podcast into the wilderness.
No, I
kidding with you.
But I'm saying, like, here's another movie that I thought of, not while I was watching this, but as we were talking about this, with the different philosophies, is I know I saw like an extra on the DVD for Groundhog Day, where Harold Ramis is saying he had people of all kinds of faiths and backgrounds coming up to him saying, yeah, this is what we believe. This is what spoke to me. I have my beliefs, and I can respect other beliefs, but I also know that as human beings, we're all made of some of the same stuff. And just because we come at it from different places doesn't mean we don't have the same feelings and fears and wants and desires.
Well, it's funny. I was teasing you about the Bible thing, but
yeah,
I'm also a world-class giant hypocrite, because I'm also the same person who read the book, The Laughing Jesus. It's one of my favorite books I've ever read. And
what was it called?
The Laughing Jesus.
Okay.
And it talks about Gnosticism. And one of the things, so the book is broken into two parts. And the first half kind of demystifies the Jesus myth. One of the things it says about the Jesus myth is that every religion has a Jesus myth. Like the story of the Immaculate Conception, the raising of the child, and the child becoming the prophet, and then the prophet being sacrificed for the good of the people, that kind of a thing. That happens in a lot of different religions. Like, it's not, the book's point that it was making was that a lot of the cornerstones of traditional Christianity are shared among a variety of different religions.
Okay. And see, I could get defensive and go, how dare you? But there are parallels all over the place. Now, I
say that because I'm sitting here thinking about like Eastern philosophy, and you're like, some of the Eastern philosophy you're talking about, Radulich, is actually in the Western Bible. Oh, okay. Oops.
Yeah, because we're all human, and we all have the same. Well, DNA is not the right word, but I mean, we all have these experiences.
Yeah.
So, now, do I believe they come from one source, and other people may believe they come from another? Okay. But I mean, I don't think that those parallels, cheapen my beliefs, or that my belief discounts other people's feelings and experiences. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All of this to say that clearly, I don't think the critics got this movie. was someone's like, what are they talking about again? We're talking about the fact that the critics reacted harshly to this movie, and we're trying to kind of unpack why. I think you and I didn't have really a dog in this hunt. We're just sort of reacting to the media as it is. And I think a lot of the critics were way too challenged by what Zemeckis is doing to react that harshly, because transitioning to pure craft, if you want to say here is a little too schmaltzy, I also think that's just your emotional reaction to that kind of theme, that kind of emotion. And I don't know. I'm going to go as far as to say, that's why I brought up my dad. You're probably a little bitter, because I'm watching this and I don't have that kind of bitterness. I also don't have. I'm 49, not 79, so I'm coming at this movie from a little bit of a different place. That said, the degenerative aging technology looked pretty good. It's not as bad as Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, or Robert De Niro in The Irishman, where it definitely looked like an old man was being puppeteered. On the other hand, they don't ask Tom Hanks to fight his way through train cars. So,
I would watch that movie though.
A lot of this movie is him or Robin Wright kind of just standing around or walking around this one particular set piece. There's not a lot asked of them, so you're not asking the AI to do as much heavy lifting, which I think worked in the film's favor. What did you think?
Yeah, although I can see Richard Linklater going, AI, you just started filming this 40 years ago.
Outside of that, I think the use of the panel technology kind of reminded me of, thinking back on it, kind of reminded me of Ang Lee's Hulk, where Ang Lee's thinking
this is crazy, Mark.
He has to have real panels.
Yeah, when we started talking about this and the panels, I'm like, maybe I should mention Ang Lee's Hulk.
There's a lot of that going on in this movie. Just
like you're in here.
We're connected, man.
Wait, I'm sorry. It's like you're in here.
I wanted to make a joke. It's like we're connected, man. It's like the heathen and then I don't know, the follower, fuck whatever you are. The I can't super religious person, and I couldn't come up with a good alliteration with heathen.
Heathen and the
ChatGPT.
Holy Man.
Sure, the heathen and the holy
which
man.
I'm thinking of the Eddie Murphy movie now. But
wonderful. We should pitch the heathen and the holy man as a fucking television show.
Or a podcast.
Sure.
I'm not really that holy.
Other than that, it's so funny because we only deal with this one family for the 50s to 2003-ish?
Early 2000s, yeah.
Yeah. So for a 50-year period, but 50 to 100 years prior to that, there's 87 different storylines we're following.
Yeah.
You have Ben Franklin's brother, the family that has the house.
The son.
Yeah, sorry, Ben Franklin. Yeah, yes. There's there's the couple where, and I swear to God, I laughed at this because the fight that the woman and her husband are having over whether or not he should be in a fucking airplane is every fight I've ever had with a woman ever. I have big dreams and big ideas, and I want to do wild and crazy things. And the woman's like, everything about you is insane. Stop it. Be normal.
We're near the aerodrome.
Who'd want this? And then it's like, I don't want my kid to be the anxious mess you are. I'm going to take her up with me. Why would you do that and put her in danger? And it's like, you're both kind of making valid points, but I'm with the guy because that's me now. So there's that. There's Did you get the sense that the wife of the guy in the Relax-A-Boy scenes was a hooker that he married?
No.
Okay.
I thought they were genuinely happy, even before he was.
I didn't say they weren't. That doesn't answer my question. It's
that's true. But no, I didn't think of her as a hooker. I mean, she did seem a little out of his league.
But in the first scene we see her, she's vacuuming in just a bra.
What do you wear when you vacuum, Mark?
A full 3-piece suit Because propriety, sir. No, I'm trying to say that
Hey, I think I've got your next TikTok.
she, I feel like she was dressed a little like a floozy in that time period versus
She was in her house, Mark.
She seemed, I don't know.
She was by herself, just
maybe
her,
I'm-
Robert Zemeckis, and the few people that saw this movie.
Maybe I'm projecting, but I don't know. It feels like a proper woman would have worn more clothing while vacuuming, and there she's all loosey-goosey and kind of silky pajama things and a bra top, and I'm like, for God's sakes, woman, put some clothes on.
Okay, now, if you had to bet who was going to go on the puritanical rant about how a woman should vacuum in her own home, who would you have placed your money on?
I'm just saying, I feel like that was signaling something that they don't follow through on.
She's comfortable in her own skin.
Okay. Since we don't know, we really have no clue. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm just saying, I needed to ask that question. The podcast, we're talking about a movie, and that's a thought that I had. Like, I think he married a hooker. That's a hooker he married. He's taming a hooker, that guy. And she's into it because he's about to become a rich person who invented the lazy boy. I see what you're all about.
And I was like, they're in love. How nice.
You and I are not the same person. All right. Anything else about the craft review of this movie? Because, like I said, I really like it. I think it was well made. I don't think people are going to get it. This definitely feels like a movie. It's on Netflix right now. It feels like a movie that might be appreciated and a little more ably digested at home than in the theater.
Yeah, I can see that. One of the things I said early on was that I thought the book and the movie were only going to have the concept in common. And so it was neat to see, and somebody who didn't know it was a book or hadn't read it wouldn't appreciate this, but some of the things that were almost panel straight out of it.
The doctor joke. I had to turn to my friend and be like, that's in the book. I know that. That's in the book.
Yeah. One thing that I thought was different was in the book. I felt like the book was a lot more mundane in the events it depicted. I mean, so you have the guy who invented the lazy boy.
Right.
There, you apparently have the meteor that wiped out the dinosaurs within line of sight, striking within line of sight of the house.
Sure.
And it's just like, I mean, I don't know. It was like, well, part of the point of this is, mundane life and how it fits into the grand cosmic scale. Not, did you know the lazy boy was invented half a mile from where the dinosaurs were wiped out?
That was actually a criticism from William Bibiani, that he didn't like this movie because it felt like it insisted upon itself. Like, come on.
Ah, you found my reviewer pen name, I see.
William Bibiani. Okay. Damn it. I didn't realize you guys were the same person. One of the things he said in their review of this on Critical and Critically Acclaimed was, he was like, for this movie to work, you have to believe that all of these things are taking place in that one spot at that time, to the point where they have to invent reasons to not be in the dining room. And it's like, come on. I live in a house. You use more rooms than this. It doesn't all happen in the living room. I'm like, that's fair.
Yeah, I get that. And I do, I mentioned at one point, Alan Silvestri was part of the returning Forrest Gump team. Alan Silvestri is my favorite composer after John Williams. I mean, who can top John Williams? But, he did this, he did Forrest Gump, he did The Avengers. I mean, at one point I wrote, okay, this is kind of predictable to the point where I want to dislike some of it, but I'm feeling stuff. And then I see the credits. I'm like, oh, of course it was Alan Silvestri tugging at my heartstrings.
Before we close off, because I've kind of developed a format for comic strip all these months later. Key differences. Narrative structure. The comic is non-linear and collage-like, offering fleeting glimpses across time with no central narrative. The film builds a more traditional story focusing on one family. Character focus. The comic lacks central characters. It's about the place. The film humanizes the location by following recurring figures portrayed by Hanks and Wright. Visual language. McGuire's comic is a formalist exploration of layout with nested time panels. The film uses visual effects to create fluid transitions and emotional resonance. Themes. While both focus on time, memory, and change, The comic leans towards the philosophical and observational. The film injects sentimentality and existential depth, emphasizing human connection. And
How
five,
dare they?
and five, artistic mediums. The comic experiments with graphic design and paneling, while the film leans into digital effects and performance. Modern filmmaking, everyone. I'll give you the last word on this here experience.
Oh, I see what you did here. Actually, after your summary of the similarities and differences, my main thought is if our mutual friend Jesse Starcher started a band, it should be Jesse and the Nested Time Panels.
I once saw Jesse and the Nested Time Panels open up for Metallica in 1989 at the Nassau Coliseum.
Oh, wow. I hear that's not too far from where the meteor that killed the dinosaurs struck. I don't know. I've got nothing here. I think I've said most of what I wanted to say about it. I enjoyed it. It neither one quite met my expectations, but that was mostly in a good way. I mean, honestly, when I was going in the movie, I was like, okay, it's going to be interesting how they do it, but I'm not all that. This was something I was like, maybe I'll watch that at some point. I don't know. And then you're like, hey, it's a graphic novel, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I can see that. But it wasn't anything that I was like, oh no, I don't want to watch this. Nor was it anything I was like, I can't wait to see how the Gump team handles things 30 years later. But so it was overall a net positive.
Alrighty. Well, the next time Evan Bevins will be here as we work our way through comic books adapted into movies. July 19th, we're going to do the Hercules book and the movie from 2014 starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
And somebody's still got to find those comics.
And then on August 16th, we're going to do Nimona, which that is a Netflix movie that is also a graphic novel that won all kinds of awards. And then in November 22nd, so we'll be skipping a few months, but I think no, because I backfilled with triple features. So where is your name, Evan? Evan. Nope.
I didn't remember us talking about Nimona. I'm not opposed. I just didn't remember that.
Yeah, I gave you like a whole list of stuff and kind of booked you out for the year.
Okay.
So I said August. Oh, okay. I don't know why I couldn't find you before. So in September, we're doing a triple feature: Oblivion, Snowpiercer, and The Fountain, all adapted from comic book series, but don't have a particular graphic novel as such. Or I remember when I did the research for this, there was something that connected these three movies together that had tangentially to do with comic books.
Well, I know Oblivion started out as a screenplay. He couldn't get it made. Then he turned it into a comic, and then they were like, "Hey, we should make a movie out of this."
Right. I knew there was something along those lines. So yes, Oblivion, Snowpiercer, and The Fountain will be a triple feature that we're doing. I said in October. October. I haven't run this by you yet. I don't know if you're going to want to do this, but again, this is more stuff that these are movies based on comic books, so it fits in our milieu. But I don't know if you're actually going to want to talk about these.
Okay.
Spawn, Faust, Love of the Damned, and Dylan Dog, Dead of Night.
Haven't seen any of those. I've heard of all of them except the Faust one.
Yeah, that was another one ChatGPT recommended when I was like, what goes with Spawn that we haven't done yet? So there's that. November, like I said, is Polar. And did I pick something for December?
I don't know. I'm going back through our chat. I mean, I'm game for all of these, but I don't remember talking about a lot of these.
We didn't. I assigned them to you. And
okay, well,
I decided what we were doing for the rest of the year because I got tired of asking you.
That's fine. I'll tell you off the air why that weirded me out for a second.
Okay. Either way, I decided that's what we're doing for the rest of the year, and if I have to move the dates, that's fine. But at least I have the topics picked out.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, I decided that a representative democracy wasn't working for me anymore.
Yeah.
So I went full dictator. I hear that's all.
It's overrated sometimes. I've always said you're a dictator.
That's what everyone says about me, Evan, and I lean into it. All right. So that's what's going on in the future for us. This past week, Father's Day, myself and Jesse read all 30 issues and crossover issues of the Darth Vader comic from the mid-teens, and Jesse still hasn't forgiven me for making him read 30 comics for a single show. I'm now put on a 12 to 15 issue cap. So I did this to myself.
A lot of his shows are just one issue.
It's fair. So on Monday, myself and Robert reviewed How to Train Your Dragon, the live action. It was as good as you think it is. There was nothing on Tuesday. Wednesday, myself, Alexis, and Jesse reviewed The Critic, seasons 1 and 2. On Thursday,
I heard it stinks.
Buy my book. Matt Kettner kind of bailed me out of a jam because he wanted to talk about Cloud Atlas, and Sean wasn't unfortunately able to make the show. So myself and Mac did a director focus on the Wachowski sisters. We looked at Bound, which, Cloud Atlas, and Jupiter Ascending. Tomorrow, myself and Jesse are going to do an extra source material for this month. We're looking at All-Star Superman because that is the book that the new Superman movie is seemingly based on. So I wanted to check that out.
At least tonally, yeah.
Yeah. Monday, we're reviewing Ilio, the new Pixar movie. Thursday, we close out Pride Month by talking about Milk, Kinsey, and Lizzie. And I believe, and Friday, I keep forgetting this. Friday, myself and Jesse, we returned to sessions and returning an old gag reel from an Ant-Man comic review where we were making jokes about Pink Darren Cross being LGBTQ Hulk. And Jesse said a really funny thing. He said, "Hit it, Darren." And I've never stopped laughing about it. So we're going to turn that little bit of silliness into a dubstep song.
Okay.
Tell them where they can find you.
Well, you can find me if you find my views fascinating, but my voice grating. You can find my writing at *51.blogspot.com. Don't have a major project at this point, but I have some semi-regular features like Missing Links, where I go and read issues that I missed the first time around. Just found the first part of a 2-part Spider-Man Hulk crossover a couple weeks ago. Read the first issue 30-some years ago. No, read the second issue 30-some years ago. Read the first issue this week. That's under #Missing Links. I do delve into movies without the craft-focused guidance of Mark Radulich occasionally with Dollar Tree Cinema. Just whatever movies I can find or I could have found at Dollar Tree. They had stopped carrying movies now. Fortunately, I hoarded way too many. You can find me there. I also talk comics with Jesse from time to time on unspoken issues or source material. We just recorded a couple unspoken issues episodes, and once a month he and I put our heads together for Snap material to talk about the mobile Marvel card game Marvel Snap.
Awesome. All right, folks, thank you for joining us here on the Comic Stripped. For Evan Bevins, I have to pee. Be well, be safe, and behave.